Good evening. It is a sound like any other. It will end, writes Wallace Stevens in It Must Change, a sequence whose audible existence, at least as rendered in the poet's voice, had until this fall, to a certain extent, ended. The lacquer microgroove disc of It Must Change, recorded 60 years ago this month on October 8th, 1954, at Trans Radio Studio in Boston, under the auspices of the Woodberry Poetry Room and its then curator, Jack Sweeney, appears to have been accidentally left out of the Hollis catalog entry for this series of studio recordings, along with its side B, which featured a complete and subtly resequenced reading of An Ordinary Evening in New Haven. The Poetry Room, which has focused its preservation efforts primarily on the fragile format of reels and had digitized what it thought were the sum total of Stevens' recordings that day, recently refocused its efforts on its collection of lacquer discs due to the generous support of the NEDCC, which invited us to participate in a pilot study of its remarkable optical digitization technology known as IRENE. IRENE is a touchless technology which permits archives and individuals to preserve broken, fragile, even gouged discs and cylinders without the risky intervention of a stylus. Some of its representatives are here this evening to answer questions afterwards. In conjunction with this pilot study, my extraordinary colleague, Mary Walker Graham, and I began an extensive survey of our over 2,000 uncatalogued phonodiscs and proceeded to discover and preserve what we believe to be the only extant recording of It Must Change, and to digitize a much higher quality recording of the auroras of autumn than was extractable from the reels. Wallace Stevens was born in 1879, 2 years after Edison's invention of the phonograph caused the Scientific American to proclaim, "Speech, as it were, is now immortal." Stevens died in August 1955, 10 months after making the recordings you will hear tonight. At the time of his death, we're now discovering he had recorded 2 sections of his sequence, Notes Toward a Supreme Fiction. It Must Give Pleasure, which was recorded at the 92nd Street Y in November 1954, and It Must Change, made for us the month prior. One wonders if he would ultimately have recorded the entire sequence if he had survived. Like Sylvia Plath, Stevens' recording history is condensed into about 4 years at the end of his life. He was, it's fair to say, a recording-averse versifier. According to a Harvard Crimson article from the same period, Jack Sweeney is the sort of man for whom Stevens would overcome his reluctance to record. With his charm and intelligence, he is a person Stevens could trust. A poem is written as a text over time, but in this case, recorded on a single day, a day in which the author had a cough, and that cough and his evident vocal fatigue changes the particular iteration and sonic contours of the poem. In the mid-century, recordings, as you probably know from labels like Cadman and Argo, were still by and large mimicking the criterion of published poetry collections, in that they strove for perfection and definitiveness. In many cases, producers and editors remove the kind of procedural elements and vocal marginalia that we, in our postmodernity, often revel in. The imperfect, to quote Stevens, is our paradise. Here at Houghton Library, through our manuscript, rare books, and audio collections, you can experience Stevens' poetry as a living and ongoing entity, and the act of publication is just one point in its progression. You can encounter his writing as it changes from typescript with gaps left to permit the passage of the growing poem, to a fair copy made in pencil in his hand, to the published first editions of his books, to highly produced and polished commercial recordings of his work, to the draft-like recordings you will hear tonight, in which the audible slippages he makes resemble some of the ways in which his textual drafts change piece to pierce and reason to season, and reveal a man for whom the idiosyncratic pronunciation of words and reinvestment in them of the fullest inflation and vocalization of their diphthongs and phonemes tries by a peculiar speech to speak. In order to accompany us this evening, we are going to project primarily the published version of the poems retyped by Mary Walker Graham for this event. But in the case of It Must Change, we're also going to be showing a few typescripts and fair copies that are available for specific sections.
I shall read the second part of Notes Toward a Spring Fiction. The title, It Must Change. As I pass from one part of this poem to another, I shall read the numbers of the parts. 1. The old seraph, parcel gilded, among violets inhale the appointed odor, while the doves rose up like phantoms from chronologies. The Italian girls wore jonquils in their hair, and there the seraph saw, had seen long since, in the bandeaus of the mothers, would see again. The bees came booming as if they had never gone, as if hyacinths had never gone. We say, this changes, and that changes. Thus, the constant violets, doves, girls, bees, and hyacinths are inconstant objects of inconstant cause in a universe of inconstancy. This means night blue is an inconstant thing. The seraph is Satyr in Saturn, according to his thoughts. It means the distaste we feel for this withered scene is that it is not changed enough. It remains, it is a repetition. The bees come booming as if the pigeons chatter in the air, an erotic perfume, half of the body, half of an obvious acid, is sure what it intends, and the booming is blunt, not broken in subtleties. 2. The President ordains the bee to be immortal. President ordains. But does the body lift its heavy wing, take up again an inexhaustible being, rise over the loftiest antagonists to drone the green phrases of its juvenile? Why should the bee recapture a lost blog, find a deep echo in a horn, and buzz the bottomless trophy, new hornsman after old? The President has apples on the table, and barefoot servants round him who adjust the curtains to a metaphysical tea, and the banners of the nation flutter, burst on the flagpoles in a red-blue dazzle, whack at the halyards. Why then, when in golden fury spring vanishes, the scraps of winter, why should there be a question of returning, or of death in memory's dream? Is spring asleep? This warmth is for lovers at last accomplishing their love. This being not resuming this booming and booming of the new come bee. 3. The great statue of the General Dupuy rested immobile, though neighboring catafalques bore off the residents of its noble place. The right uplifted foreleg of the horse suggested that at the final funeral, the music halted and the horse stood still. On Sundays, lawyers in their promenades approached this strongly heightened effigy to study the past. Doctors, having bathed themselves with care, sought out the nerveless frame of a suspension, a permanence, so rigid that it made the General a bit absurd. Changed his true flesh to an inhuman bronze. There never had been, never could be such a man. The doctors disbelieved. The doctors said that as keen, illustrious ornament as a setting for geraniums, the General, the very place Dupuy, in fact, belonged among our more vestigial states of mind. Nothing had happened because nothing had changed. Yet the General was rubbish in the end. 4. Two things of opposite natures seem to depend on one another, as a man depends on a woman, day on night, the imagined on the real. This is the origin of change. Winter and spring, cold copulars, embrace, and forth the particulars of rapture come. Music falls on the silence like a sense, a passion that we feel, not understand. Morning and afternoon are clasped together, and north and south are an intrinsic couple, and sun and rain a plural, like two lovers that walk away as one in the greenest body. In solitude, the trumpets of solitude are not of another solitude resounding. A little string speaks for a crowd of voices. The partaker partakes of that which changes him. The child that touches takes character from the thing, the body it touches. The captain and his men are one, and the sailor and the sea are one. Follow after, O my companion, my fellow, myself, sister and solace, brother and delight. 5. On a blue island in a sky-wide water, the wild orange trees continued to bloom and bear long after the planter's death. a few limes remained. Where his house had fallen, 3 scraggy trees weighted with garbled green. These were the planter's turquoise and his orange blotches. These were his 0 green, a green baked greener in the greenest sun. These were his beaches, his sea myrtles in white sand, the patter of the long sea slushes. There was an island beyond him on which rested an island to the south, on which rested like a mountain, a pineapple pungent as Cuban summer, and là-bas, the cool bananas grew, hung heavily on the great banana tree, which pierces clouds and bends on half the world. He thought often of the land from which he came, how that whole country was a melon, pink if seen rightly, and yet a possible red. An unaffected man in a negative light could not have borne his labor, nor have died, sighing, that he should leave the banjo's twang. 6. Be thou me, said sparrow to the crackled blade, and you, be thou me as you blow, when in my coppice you behold me be. Arche, the bloody wren, the felon jay, KK, the jug-throated robin pouring out, be thou me in my glade. There was such idiot minstrelsy in rain, so many clappers going without bells, that these be thous compose a heavenly gong, one voice repeating, one tireless chorister, the phrases of a single phrase, KK, a single text, granite monotony, one sole face, like a photograph of fate, glass blower's destiny, bloodless episcopus, eye without lid, mind without any dream. These are of minstrels lacking minstrelsy, of an earth in which the first leaf is the tale of leaves, in which the sparrow is a bird of stone that never changes. Be thou him, you and you, be thou him and be thou. It is a sound like any other. It will end. 7. After a luster of the moon, we say, we have not the need of any paradise. We have not the need of any seducing hymn. It is true. Tonight, the lilacs magnify the easy passion, the ever-ready love of the lover that lies within us, and we breathe an odor evoking nothing, absolute. We encounter in the dead middle of the night the purple odor, the abundant bloom. The lover sighs as for accessible bliss, which he can take within him on his breath, possess in his heart, conceal, and nothing know. For easy passion and ever-ready love are of our earthly birth, and here and now, and where we live, and everywhere we live, as in the top cloud of a May night evening, as in the courage of the ignorant man who chanced by book, in the heat of the scholar who writes the book, hot for another accessible bliss, the fluctuations of certainty, the change of degrees of perception in the scholar's dark. 8. On her trip around the world, Nanzia Nunzio confronted Ozymandias. She went alone and like a vestal long prepared. I am the spouse. She took her necklace off and laid it in the sand. As I am the spouse. She opened her stone-studded belt. I am the spouse, divested of bright gold, the spouse beyond emerald or amethyst, beyond the burning body that I bear. I am the woman stripped more nakedly than nakedness, standing before an inflexible order, saying, I am the contemplated spouse. Speak to me that which spoken will array me in its own only precious ornament. Set on me the Spirit's diamond coronal. Clothe me entire in the final filament, so that I tremble with such love, so known, and myself am precious for your perfecting. Then Ozymandias said, the spouse, the bride, is never naked. A fictive covering weaves, always glistening, from the heart and mind. 9. The poem goes from the poet's gibberish to the gibberish of the Vulgate and back again. Does it move to and fro, or is it both at once? Is it a luminous flittering, or the concentration of a cloudy day? Is there a poem that never reaches words, and one that chaffers the time away? Is the poem both peculiar and general? There's a meditation there in which there seems to be an evasion, a thing not apprehended or not apprehended well. Does the poet evade us as in a senseless element. Evade this hot, dependent orator, the spokesman at our bluntest barriers, exponent by a form of speech, the speaker of a speech, only a little of the tongue. It is the gibberish of the Vulgate that he seeks. He tries, by a peculiar speech, to speak the peculiar potency of the general, to compound the imagination's Latin with the lingua franca et jocundissima. 10. A bench was his catalepsy, theatre of trope. He sat in the park. The water of the lake was full of artificial things, like a page of music, like an upper air, like a momentary color in which swans were seraphs, were saints, were changing essences. The west wind was the music, the motion, the force to which the swans curveted, a will to change, a will to make iris frettings on the blank. There was a will to change, a necessitous and present way, a presentation, a kind of volatile world too constant to be denied. The eye of a vagabond in metaphor that catches our own. The casual is not enough. The freshness of transformation is the freshness of a world. It is our own. It is ourselves, the freshness of ourselves. And that necessity and that presentation are rubbings of a glass in which we peer. Of these beginnings, gay and green, propose the suitable amours. Time will write them down.